Yeah.
I guess one thing that we quite like to lead off with is, it's just something quite simple, but at the same time complicated. What is golf course architecture to you? What does it mean?
That's a complicated question. What's house architecture really? I guess it's what the golf course is. It's how it's built and how it plays and what questions it asks and what's the purpose of the game really. And the more interesting the architecture, the more interesting the questions it asks, the more interesting the game is to play really. So it can be from something that's an incredibly basic public course that the course I started on was a 9-hole public course with maybe had a couple of token bunkers, but it was a place to hit a ball around. I guess it was architecture. It wasn't very good architecture, but it was important in the sense that it was 30 cents for 9 holes, 40 cents for 18. So that was pretty cheap golf. So that was architecture. And then within 2 years, I was walking around Royal Melbourne watching Tom Weiskopf in the World Cup, playing for America, and realising that there was another level of golf course architecture. So I'd gone from, seeing the most basic golf course in the city to one of the greatest courses in the world within a couple of years. So I guess that was an early education on what architecture was, how it could, the different levels it had and how it could change the way the game was played, but how both things were important in the end.
Mike, you mentioned courses that ask interesting questions. What are some courses that come to mind for you that ask those interesting questions, and how do those courses go about making for interesting golf?
Well, I don't think anything's close to St Andrews in terms of asking interesting questions, because you can play every shot in that golf course. You can hit it wherever you want, pretty much. But every choice has a consequence. The next shot's more difficult and no better encapsulated than at the road hole, really, where, the further left you go, the increasingly difficult the second shot becomes. But I don't think there's a course in the world, because of the firm ground and the wind and the fact that you can run the ball onto so many greens, that there's a place that gives you so many options to choose from. It's the most confusing golf course to play, I always found. The opposite, of course, is 30-yard wide fairways with long grass down the sides, and you hit it where the USGA or the architect or the PGA Tour or whoever tells you where to hit it. So you're just playing the golf course the way that it's arranged in a sense. But St Andrews is the opposite of that. It's the most unarranged course in the world, probably, isn't it? I would have thought St Andrews.
Yeah, by default, right?
Yeah, you can play the first down the 18th fairway, and you can play the second shot of the 14th down the 5th fairway, and you can run the ball onto the greens, except for the first hole where you've got to fly the ball onto the green. And when the pin's in the front, do I hit it 40 feet past and 2-putt back down the hill, or do I, try and do whatever? So that's the most. And I think, because I grew up in Melbourne, where Mackenzie had such an influence, you could see the influence of St Andrews at Royal Melbourne, really. We big wide fairways, but when you're on one side of the fairway, you had a completely different shot than you had from the other side. And that was, the essence of interesting golf, really, was, how you had different shots from different parts of a hole. But the easier shot was you had to challenge the hazard.